Hey, welcome to the All Pro Dad podcast. I'm Ted Lowe, and today I am joined by Dr. Chinwé Williams. We are so excited. Dr. Chinwé is a licensed professional counselor, a board-certified counselor, and certified EMDR therapist. She earned her doctorate in counseling education and practice from the Georgia State University and her master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. She's the owner of Meaningful Solutions Counseling and Consulting and is the co-author of the best-selling book, Seen, Healing Despair and Anxiety in Kids and Teens to the Power of Connection. Dr. Chinwé lives in Cumming, Georgia, with her husband, 2 young sons, and 1 young adult daughter. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, and I've told you this very briefly, but I want our listeners to hear this too. Every podcast host will tell you, oh, we're so excited to have you. But here's what I know. It's true. They're not as excited as I am. I can promise you, because when we were going through the toughest time with one of our daughters, anxiety, panic attacks that I'd never seen in my life, we were so confused. I mean, we loved her plenty, but we didn't know what to do. And I ran into your co-author, Will, and he said, hey, Ted, will you proof this book, read this book and let us know what you think? Be a pre-reader. And I read it and it was like, oh, this was like a manual for us right now. Because the thing I learned so much from that was if you had said to me, hey, when she's having a panic attack, you need to walk out and let her experience and then learn how to manage herself. And then she'll know how to do it when you're not there. I'd been like, okay, well, I would have done anything you said, but it was all about empathy and being there with her. And I shared that on episode. And so she's having a panic attack and I just kind of backed my back up to her and says, I'm right here. I love you. You're okay. Singing a little song I would sing to her when she was little. And she started to calm down. And I started to learn that day that empathy was so powerful and I'm really bad at it. So thank you. Thank you, friend. You changed our family and I'm just so grateful.
Oh, wow. Wow. I love that story so much. And you know, what's interesting about what you just said is that empathy is powerful. I agree with that. A lot of us are bad at it. And it's something that we can learn. And Will is my amazing friend and co-author. And when we speak to parents all the time, he says, this is something that I had to practice because I'm so left brain. I'm so logical. I go straight to the solutions. And so this is a testament that, all dads can learn this. All humans can learn this. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing that. Bless you and your precious family. Now, I want to tell you, to this day, your book, which I had the pleasure of reading and endorsing, is next to our bed in the guest room, where my husband actually does his work. That's like his home office. Every now and again, I'm like, you want to pick it up again, babe? To be honest. But you have been a blessing. I read it from cover to cover. And, I feel like so many of even the conversation that we're going to have today, there's just so much overlap when it comes to connection with humans, right?
It is, and it does collide. And it was such an powerful part because I got to your book before I was writing mine. And it was such a great influence of that. And I think for dads, especially because we're fixers, I mean, my wife would tell you she's a fixer too, but for dads, we're notorious for being fixers, but it was so powerful. And that was a great book. But also, I want to spend a lot of our time, if not all of the rest of our time, talking about your new book, which is out, ready to be. We'll put all these things we're talking about, dads, we'll put it in the show notes. It's called Calm, Courageous, and Connected, A Parent's Guide to Raising Emotionally Resilient Kids. And Dr. Chinwé, what we do each week is we'll ask one big question. And so our question of the week that we're so excited to have you to be a part of is, how do I raise emotionally resilient kids? And I know you'll get to that. But before we get there, I want to back up a little bit. You see so many young people in your practice struggling with anxiety and depression. What's underneath all that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I began my career, just for your audience to know a little bit about my background. I began my career as a high school counselor. I did not intend to end up in the school system, but that year there were a lot of positions available and I was like, I want my summers off. So I applied and got in. And I want to tell you that back then, which was, 18 years ago, I saw depression. I saw self-harm. I saw anxiety. I helped kids who were struggling with difficult home environments and saw how that was affecting their academics. But years and years later, today, as a private therapist that works and consults with families, that works with young people still, I also work with adults. You're absolutely right. The rates of anxiety and depression and self-harm have been steadily increasing for the past 10 years. And that's really what I want to emphasize to your listeners is that so many of us heard about youth mental health around the pandemic. And absolutely, the pandemic did no service to us in terms of our mental and emotional health and our social connection. And it did exacerbate rates, but those rates have been growing. As a mental health researcher, we've been seeing it for about 10 years. And in terms of what's at the root of it, there's so many different factors. Let me just point out that right now, according to the latest stats that we have, anxiety is the number one mental health condition for young people. It's actually the number one mental health condition for adults as well. And for adolescents, specifically 12 to 17, 16% of those kids actually have an anxiety disorder. So it's not just circumstantial or maybe what was happening with your daughter, a tough season or occasional panic attacks or occasional worry. These kids meet criteria for a mental health condition. And then we think, okay, kids that are 12 to 17, they're adolescents. That phase is filled with hormones. Then you look deeper into the stats and you see that kids between the ages of 3 and 17, 11% of those kids also have an anxiety disorder.
Starting at 3 years old.
Yeah, which is, and we'll get into why I felt really compelled to write the book for parents of younger children as well as preteens, because we are seeing these signs and symptoms earlier and earlier. And in terms of, going back to your question, what's at the root? Well, there are a number of things that are at the root today that were at the root when I started my career 18 years ago. Academic pressures, the pressure to succeed, the pressure to fit in to your social environments. Those things can be, very difficult for a developing brain. And we have to remember that a child's brain, even a teenager's brain, is still developing. And that is what helps with emotional regulation, but that doesn't get developed until the mid-20s. But what we are seeing today, and I just want to go there, if I have your permission, Ted, just to be honest, what I'm seeing in my practice are kids that are more and more worried about the things that we as adults are worried about. They are worried about economic insecurity. They are worried about political instability. Some kids are actually really worried about climate control. We sometimes, joke about that. They are worried, and this is me also traveling across the country with Will, talking to kids in rural environments, talking to kids that are in the urban or inner city or large city environments. They're worried about gun violence in the school system. So of course, that's going to make you feel anxious about, about a lot of things. And then the biggest difference that I've seen in my career and what I'm noticing in my sessions are kids being impacted by digital connection, right? So social media plays a huge role in what we're seeing with the elevated rates of anxiety and depression. There's constant comparison. Kids are looking at curated, idealized images of other kids' lives, which can sometimes lead to them feeling unworthy, or it damages their own self-esteem because they don't feel like they're keeping up or measuring up. And then we, of course, know about cyberbullying, which has been around for a long time. Harassment has really impacted kids online, and they don't tend to tell their parents about those types of things. They think that that's just kind of what it is. And then also, many young people, and might be interesting for your audience to know, many young people report that they have fewer close friends than previous generations, right? So think about it, the combination of less face-to-face interaction, not having those opportunities to figure out how to relate to others socially, and increased time on the screen, whether it's social media or gaming or video. None of those things are terrible. A lot of those things have beautiful benefits, but we also have to look at what happens when there's excessive usage. So kids aren't sleeping as well. And we know that sleep disruption that comes from those digital devices can actually lead to emotional dysregulation.
When you're talking about kids being more concerned with climate change and things going on in the world, I remember we used to have to say to our anxious daughter, would go, "Hey, this is a mom and dad issue. This isn't a kid thing." Why do you think? Is it because of social media that the kids have more awareness of these things? Is that where the anxiety is coming from? Is that why they have more anxiety about those things?
Yeah, Ted, that my husband and I had this conversation not too long ago. There was a period of time when he was a kid living in Georgia, which is where we currently live. He lived in South Georgia at the time, and kids were going missing. Kids were going missing. Of course, that is petrifying, right? Like agonizing. Right. And locally, people felt it. They were watching the news. They understood what was happening. Families were, concerned. But he said he didn't feel a thing. He played outside. He hung out with his friends. And that would not be the case today, right? Kids are not only learning about what's happening in their community, they're learning about scary events, natural disasters, global crises, not just within their community or their neighborhood, but all over the world. And when you're connected, or even if your child isn't connected, but members of their friend group are connected through their older sibling, or maybe they're online, that information gets back. I've had my kid come home 10 years old, say things to me, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, our TV hasn't been on for 10 days. Where did you get that information? You're not online.
Right. Even when we set the boundaries, sometimes their friends' parents don't, and there we are. They're going to see so many things. It's so much stress there.
So I always tell parents to look out for behavioral indications, because if a child is sad or anxious or worried about what's going on in the world and they keep it to themselves, they are in distress, but we don't always see it until it gets to a certain point. And so some behavioral indications are sleep disturbances, a child who is unable to go to sleep, unable to sleep through the night, waking up early, complaining about nightmares, food. If kids are eating too much or eating too little, that could be a sign that outwardly we as parents and caring adults can also see. The biggest thing with kids that are in distress are mood shifts and avoidance. And so mood shifts, we're going to see a lot of that during adolescence. We're going to see a lot of that during the toddler years. And that's to be expected. But if we're seeing that more days than not, and it's impacting them in multiple different environments, so we're seeing it at home, we're hearing about it from the teachers at school, we're seeing it on the ball field, that's something that we really want to pay attention to. And then the avoidance, when a child does not want to hang out with their best friend, when a child who plays lacrosse or plays soccer and that is their passion, all of a sudden wakes up and says, "Mom, I don't feel like going to practice." That's something I want parents to really pay attention to.
In the title of your book, you have the words calm, courageous, and connected. Why are those characteristics so important for parenting kids today?
Yeah. When you think about it, Ted, isn't that what every parent wants? when we were, pregnant, when we were expecting, we had this idealized image of what it would be like to be a parent and what our kids would be like. I don't know about you, but before I had kids, I was the best parent ever in my head.
So good. Not as good as me, but you were probably pretty good.
Right. As a school counselor, I was judgy, right? I was 20 something years old, 22. And I was like talking to these kids thinking, if these parents just knew how to raise these kids. And then I had my own kids, right? Yeah. Every parent is doing the best that they can. I believe that most parents are, and all parents want their kids to be calm, brave, and connected to their peers, connected to their family, connected to their community, and of course, connected to their Heavenly Father. But with so much angst, with so much uncertainty, with so much anxiety on the rise, not just for kids, but we're hearing reports that parents are also feeling lots and lots of anxiety. For parents, it can be really overwhelming to know where to begin. So that is really the reason that I wrote this book. Again, we talked about the elevated rates in anxiety, emotional dysregulation, starting with kids that are younger. They need to feel connected to a grounded enough, calm enough adult so they can make brave and thoughtful choices.
Okay, you used the word enough, and you did that intentionally. Tell me why you just did that.
Some of what I think is breeding anxiety for parents is seeing online that you have to be calm all the time. That just is not true, nor is it possible. That you have to be, all knowing, all giving, all encompassing being for your child. First of all, we have our Heavenly Father for that. Right. And so when we put that pressure on ourselves to, kind of white knuckle it and pretend like everything's okay and pretend like we're the calmest person in the world all the time, that actually makes things worse. And your kids don't believe you. And neither does your spouse. Right. Yep. So I tell parents, I get to do webinars for, corporate corporations all the time, and they're blown away by this. And this, but I say to them, you actually don't have to feel calm to be calm. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. And you actually don't have to just, feel like you have to have it all together. Like demonstrating that humility is also really helpful for your kids. So I say calm-ish because I want you to know that there are things that you can do to demonstrate calm, even when you're frustrated, even when you're feeling overwhelmed, even when you're feeling underwater, which so many parents are feeling right now. And dads right now, we do not want to leave out dads. I love this podcast because dads are more involved than previous generations, and they are showing up to our parenting events, sitting in the front row. We've got granddads, we've got uncles, and we've got coaches, and they want to know how best to support kids. And I want them to know that they don't have to be perfect.
Because dads, we can be passionate, we can be, we'll coach you up, like we're here, we're physical, we're all the things, or high energy sometimes. Talk to the dad who doesn't feel calm in the moment, knows he needs to be calm in the moment. What's a tool that he can use in that moment to be calm enough?
I have a really simple one, and here it is. Initiate a pause or a break. And the pause, I've seen scientific journals around neuroscience that say 90 seconds is powerful. But can I tell you from my own experience and working with dads in my office, talking to their wives sometimes, 10 seconds can do the trick. 10-second pause before. Feel what you feel. Don't deny that you're feeling frustrated. Don't deny that you're thinking to yourself, I've told this kid 3 times to take his shoes off of the couch and he's not listening. I feel disrespected. And I tell dads, yeah, and I would too. And that's valid for you, right? It's okay for you to hold a boundary, and it's okay for your child to have their feelings, but it's okay for you to have your feelings too. But before you say anything, and by the way, you can say all of those things. I've told you 1,000,000 times to take your shoes, initiate that 10 to 90 second pause. When it's a really big thing, like you have a teenager that's come home at 1 a.m, the curfew was 12, and your spouse was pacing, your blood is boiling, and they walk in like, hey dad, what's up? Right? You're going to want to go off. And rightfully so. So that's where I want to give permission for dads to have their feelings, but initiate that pause. So something big like that, when there might be a safety issue or there's like blatant disobedience or disrespect, initiate a 90-second pause. And then you could even say, okay, we're going to have this conversation in the morning, but right now I'm going to go to bed because I don't want to say anything that I will later regret.
If I could go back and tell young dad Ted one thing, that would be, That might be the one thing is just slow down.
Yes.
Like you just slow down and pause and just, yeah, what happens to the brain after just 10 seconds is it's extraordinary, right? It's a couple of deep breaths long and it can make all the difference. Oh, that's so helpful for dads. And speaking of dads, I want you to speak specifically to dads about how they can build a strong connection with their kids now that's going to really show up when they're adults. Like, what is something that dads can do to make their kids resilient by connecting with them emotionally? What's a dad thing that you see that's powerful?
Oh, yeah. I've got several. But what I do want to say, just very specifically to any dad that's listening, your emotional connection with your child matters way more than you think, way more than you think, especially during those early years of development, but throughout. So it's not just about being a provider, which we appreciate and love and need you to be. It's not just about being a protector, which we appreciate and need you to be. It's really about being emotionally present. And I know that sounds squishy and soft, and Will does a great job of talking directly to the dads, like, this was like sort of like new to me. But it really is powerful because it shapes how your child begins to view themselves, begins to view others and the world. And there's research that also speaks to how it can help them become a leader, a healthy leader in the workplace environment. So what can dads or dad figures, grandpas, uncles, right? Coaches,
Right.
stepfathers, what can they do? So words, you and I come from, we have, people in common that say words over time matter, right? So words build trust and security, but so does just spending time with them, right? And so when you are spending time with your child, you are essentially saying you are safe, you matter. And so when I talk about words, we may or may not get into this with, I write about this in the book about perfectionism. How do we work with kids who feel that pressure to succeed? And sometimes we see it where they're not getting all A's, right? They're actually shutting down. So we see it both ways. Like, how do we, lift them up? And the words that dads can use in terms of saying, yes, grades are important, but you're more important. And I saw how hard you worked on this, right? So we call it a growth mindset. That's actually a Stanford psychologist developed that concept. But it talks about how hard work and effort, persistence over time will equal to results. So when we go straight to the A, or we go straight to how many balls that you hit out of left field or how many goals you scored, that can lead to perfectionism, and that can lead to kids feeling that they have to perform in order to measure up. And I've got to tell you, I haven't seen specific research on this, but to me, 18 years of doing this work, it feels like, to me, it's more powerful coming from dads.
Dr. Chinwé, one of the things we've landed on is affirming our kids' character and not their performance. That's so powerful. And so for dads, you're going to dads especially, is spend that time with them. And then you're saying their words tend to have a lot more weight than we dads could ever imagine.
Yes, absolutely.
For dads who say, I don't want my kid being disrespectful. I don't want them to be, I don't want their emotions to control them. I want them to be able to, quote unquote, pull it together. What does a dad do when a kid is being emotionally and they're emotional and they're being defiant and they're being disrespectful? What is a dad's posture in that moment or approach?
This is what I know for sure. Most kids, especially in a learning environment, most kids want to feel that connection with the person that's teaching them. So let's just start with that premise that optimal learning does not come from a place of fear. And there's neuroscience evidence to back that up. When we are really, a kid is going to do what a kid does. And like I said, our reaction, being upset or frustrated at their disobedience, is valid. And I get it. And I have been there. But when it comes to how we respond to them, every child is going to be different in terms of their temperament and what they respond to. But in terms of how we respond in general, remember that neuroscience tells us that kids cannot learn from a place of fear. They will, get in shape in that moment. And some kids will rebel, and some kids will learn that they can't do that in front of you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that deep learning that we want honestly comes not from a place of fear when we're yelling or threatening or lecturing, which we've all done, by the way. It really comes from a place of connection. So initiate that pause in 10 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever the case may be. Remind them and check in with them, because in this day, and this is really what I really harp on these days, Ted, is in this day of elevated anxiety, depression, and self-harm, what we see as disobedience may be a cry for help.
So good.
Right? In this day of depression, self-harm, anxiety, what we see as disrespect or defiance may be a child who is in distress. So we pause, we still correct, but that pause gives us enough space to check in to see what's happening. Because if the child is fearful or angry at us because we kind of go at them right in that moment, they're going to shut down, and we're not going to learn what might be underneath some of the disrespectful looking behaviors. There will be time to have those conversations, but in the immediate, that's really what I would love for dads to take away from this conversation. You can pause and then sort of explore, what's going on, and then have that conversation when your child is calmer and when you're calmer. The beautiful thing about emotional resilience and emotional connection is that you don't have to get it right every single time. There is research from the Gottman Institute that says when you attempt at this 2 out of 5 times and your kid is getting so many other good things from you and their church environment, from their community, from grandparents, your kids are going to be okay, right? So we don't have to be perfect at this, but just the attempt is going to be powerful.
For dads who feel like, oh, I've missed the boat. I've missed the boat. Like, I'm looking back, or what can a dad do that feels like, oh, I've kind of not been doing this. I've parented like I got parented, or the way I should have got parented. What do you say to him?
So to any dad that's listening right now and feels like he missed the window, because we talk about early development, remember that it's never too late to build or rebuild a connection with your child, whether your child is 5, 15, 25. Emotional connection is, guess what? Resilient. Human connection is resilient. It can be established even after ruptures. It can be re-established after ruptures. It just takes intention, consistency, and humility.
So good. It's so practical too. It's so practical, and it's so, if our kids know how to do anything, they know to say, I'm sorry, because we've had to do it so much, because we're both kind of high strung and high energy, and you're just like, oh, buddy, I'm so sorry. What do you say to dads who have kids are very, very sensitive or neurodivergent? Is it the same approach, just even more intentional?
Yeah, so it depends on, what the particular child's strengths and challenges are. So neurodivergence is an umbrella term that just means you have a child whose brain operates differently than what we consider typical, right? And so if you are a parent of a child who has ADHD, for example, or like me, and we can maybe talk about this on another podcast. My husband and I went on a podcast and shared with the world that we are raising a child who is autistic. And my oldest 14-year-old has autism, and that has been a journey. I'm a mental health therapist, but I'm not a specialist in autism. So I had to do a lot of work to understand how to care for him specifically. So I do want to highlight that it really depends on the child. There's a phrase in the autism community that says when you've met a child with autism, you've met a child with autism, because the symptoms and the behaviors and the temperament, really present so differently. In general, kids who are neurodivergent, highly sensitive, ADHD, autism, feel things more intensely. So we're talking about emotions, right? And we're talking about behaviors that look like disobedience. Well, those kids tend to even more so communicate emotions through big behaviors. And then when it's the cues have been missed for so long, it comes off as explosive behaviors depending on the child, or shutdown. But guess what? Connection is even more essential, right? But what that looks like is going to be largely dependent on who your child is. But paying attention to their nervous system, and the nervous system really, you know, this is about fight or flight, what tends to shut us down, what tends to make us feel fearful, working with it and not against it. So specific tools and strategies, and I mention a lot in my book, are about, you know, having clear communication, not using a lot of words. Especially if you have a child with ADHD or autism, with kids who are highly sensitive or autistic, giving them sensory breaks, because they actually can feel overwhelmed and overstimulated just by going to Walmart. Okay. Yep. Yeah. And loud noises. Texture can be really prickly, sometimes like scratchy and intolerable. And then teaching kids words. So this is where I love that we're having this conversation with dads. Be your child's emotional coach. But guess what? You're going to have to model that, right? So having them hear you use emotional language to describe, you know, what you're experiencing, they're going to pick up on that, and then giving them words to share what they're experiencing before you see some maybe explosive behaviors would be really helpful.
Dr. Chinwe, this has been so helpful. I knew it would be, but it's so powerful. And I love that you're talking about, we can't give away what we don't know, because we don't know. No one's taught us, but we're, you know, and I love that, you know, dads are trying. I know that you're not requiring perfection, just on every level. Thank you. Before I let you go, is we always give dads a pro move of the week. And we want it to be a simple but powerful thing that dads could do this week based on all that you said. You've given people so many nuggets. And I think most dads right now are going, no, I know what I'm going to do based on what I've heard. But if you had to give a pro move to a dad who's heard all this and goes, I'm not quite sure, what would that pro move of the week be for you?
Yeah. Ask your child, what would be your best day ever locally? Nobody's going on a plane. We're not going to Disney World. We're not doing all that. What, just ask that question and then start thinking it up. Like, when can that happen? And then the biggest thing is putting it on the calendar, even if it's for an hour. If they say, oh, I want to go fishing, and then I want to go play golf, and then I want to go to Top Golf after that, and then, you know, and then see a movie. Okay. Right. We're going to do one of those things on this day. Love it.
I love that. So powerful. It really hits that connected part too. Dr. Chinwe, thank you. And if you'll allow it, we'd love to have you back for sure.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, I would love it.
And so how can people find out more about everything that you do, your books, your website, speaking, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So the new book, Calm, Courageous, Connected, is on Amazon, but you can also get it off of my website, which is drchinwewilliams.com. And I'm most active on Instagram. So that's Dr. Williams.
Awesome. Thanks again, friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So fun. Thank you.
Well, if this podcast has been helpful for you, and we know that it has, can you take 1 minute to rate and review it? That's how other dads can find out about our show. And if you have a question that you think would need to dive into, leave it in the comments. We'd greatly appreciate that. And as always, thank you for listening. We know that you and your kids will be glad that you did.
Thanks again for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. Behind every episode is our amazing team. Producer, Haley Mawat, audio and video editor, Buck Buchanan, and production coordinator, Corey Walliff. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. So remember, if you have more questions than answers, then you're probably in the right place. See you next time.